Good evening, lovely people. Welcome to episode 60. Beyond the Double Red Doors. It's, what is it, February 9th? Yes. Oh, turn off my phone. Hi, everyone. How are you all doing? I had plans for what I wanted to talk about tonight, but obviously, I think in some, I don't know if it's going to be completely preempted, but is at least going to be partially preempted by the events of the last 24 hours, which everybody knows about, but I'm going to restate for posterity, for future people who aren't clear. These things seem to get forgotten pretty quickly. Amir Locke was killed by Minneapolis police. George Floyd was killed by Minneapolis police. All of the protesting in the wake of George Floyd, it got Derek Chauvin, well, we can't say it got Derek Chauvin convicted. He got convicted on the weight of his own. I can't even make a joke about it. I saw a joke in chat that Q made before the stream started. I thought that was quite funny, but I can't joke about it. But there's been no policy as a result of everything. All of the outrage resulted in what the U.S. apparently does with its outrage. Give people a bit of a steam vent. Not too much. And really, and criticize it and point out how patient and kind we're being by allowing people who are marginalized and oppressed to express their frustration with the fact that nothing seems to ever change. And I think it's ironic for me personally, and everything is about me, of course, because I think it was either last week or the week before when we were talking about critical race theory, where we have, so many people who are claiming we're a post-racial society. We're obviously not a post-racial society. Do no-knock warrants, are they written in a way that if you read them and did not know the context for what they are? So for those of you, I know there's people who are not from the U.S., or a couple of people not from the U.S. listening. So no-knock warrants here in the U.S. mean that the cops can enter your house, apartment, residence, whatever it is, without needing to announce themselves. They can just break the door down. If you're renting, they get the key from your landlord, and they break the door down. That's exactly what they did here. And it's interesting that no-knock warrants were a tool of like Reagan era war on drugs, which again is a way of targeting a certain group of people without saying so in black and white. You don't want to say it in black and white because you'll be held accountable. Although, the amount of things that we say now in digital black and white and are not held accountable for, that's, I think, something that maybe people from 30 or 40 years ago wouldn't have been able to predict. I think that the idea was pretty solid in most people's minds prior to Trump, that if you had a skeleton in your closet, you really couldn't run for public office because Eventually it would come out and you wouldn't get elected. But now it's just like in the course of the past 8 years, less than a decade, that's just been thrown out the window. It's just like, who can't run for office now? I mean,
more than what we think we deserve.
he announced he wasn't running for office, which is a strange thing to do. Just don't run for office. No need to announce that you're not running for office. But actually, I'm softening on Matthew McConaughey more and more. But it's just because my bar is getting lower and lower of what I find acceptable. What I find acceptable behavior, my standards are being eroded by the waves of every news headline is another wave beating against the rock. That is my head, and it sucks. Yes, Katerina running for office. Well, I mean, anything, right? Running for any political office, governor, senator, state senator, like Angela's husband in the office. Oh, okay. Well, so, but I think you made what will eventually be seen as a joke that is being made because people need to make jokes like that to cope with grim realities. Knock, knock, who's there? Well, it's not the police, right? Because they don't knock. It's probably a pithier, funnier way of saying it. And I think that joke is an attack. The victim there is, well, the victim of the joke there are the police. But yeah, I just found myself unable to like think about it through that lens yet. So no knock warrants came along, right? And the intent was to capture. The intent was if I have a brick of marijuana underneath my bed, Mary Jane, as we used to call it, and the police knock on my door and say, "Hey, it's the police." You've seen this in movies. Maybe it doesn't work with a brick, but you flush the drugs, you throw them out the window, you do whatever you can to get rid of them. The idea behind no knock warrants on paper, and maybe even in the minds of the framers, but I guarantee they didn't lose any sleep thinking about what the knock-on effects would be. Another bad pun. Unintentional, I promise. I guarantee they didn't spend too much time thinking about that. They were just like, well, okay, well, what we need to do is, then we need to make it legal for police to just break into your house. And that way you won't have time. And also, yeah, we're going to do it in the middle of the night, right? We want to be sure you're like probably asleep. I mean, we can't guarantee it yet. I mean, like how far are we really from knockout gas being like just a sort of de rigueur for these kinds of things? Just shoot a couple canisters of not tear gas, like knockout gas. Everybody in the apartment goes to sleep. Maybe a few of them have respiratory issues and they die that way, like George Floyd, right? Anyway, the intention behind no knock warrants was to seize drugs. What good does it really do? Like, okay, so admittedly, like in the case of Amir Locke here, right? He had nothing to do. He wasn't on the warrant. He wasn't a part of the warrant. He was staying in the apartment where this other person was. The intelligence that the police had led them to believe that this other person was in the apartment. He was staying there. He wasn't a part of the warrant. He wasn't a subject of an investigation. We have a Second Amendment. I'm honestly like, I'm not anti-Second Amendment. I'm for reform of the Second Amendment. I'm for defunding the police, which is not the same thing as saying eradicate the police. It's different. So yeah, I'm for Second Amendment reform, and I'm for defunding the police. But the Second Amendment reform that I'm for would that I think is acceptable is I think it's fine. I don't love it. Ideally, this is like a similar to a vaccine and an anti-vax stance in a way, right? Like, um, I would feel safer if I were allowed to keep a handgun in my home. But if, as like this, the state of affairs right now, too many people were dying, innocent people were dying as a result of me wanting to keep this freedom, that in reality, like owning a handgun is more likely to cause you to end up dead in a domestic dispute than it is to save you from a home invasion. But let's like put that aside for the moment. If I had to give up my gun, I had to give up my guns for the greater good, I'd be happy to do that. And even like that phrase is vilified, right? For the greater good, vilified. Just like if I get vaccine side effects, and I don't think I've ever told anyone this because look, I'm with Slavoj Zizek on this. He makes the point over and over again that one of the problems with liberals, even progressive liberals, is we're not dogmatic enough. He has a clip wherein he says, he's basically like, why do we even give any air to arguments about torture, right? Like, why are we even discussing that? That should never even get to the point, which it is, right? Where the U.S. government tortures people, right, routinely, citizens as well. Not that that matters because fuck nationalism too, right? But he sort of takes the stance of you don't always need to hear both sides of everything, right? There's some things that's just like inherently, if you are a decent person, you and decent is subjective, right? But I mean, come on, like torture should just never be on the table. Why is torture ever on the table? Why is it there? Why are we talking about it like there? Are we going to really listen to arguments about why torture is better? Okay, well, when we get more intelligence, that is that intelligence more accurate or less accurate because it was given under duress? Who fucking cares? Don't torture people. Like you want to set an example. This is it's ridiculous to me that we are shocked as a nation when I'm going to say this. Oh, let me say it this way. There's a lyric I quite like that was released in, I want to say like 2002, maybe 2003, but I don't think any later than that. I think it was 2002 or 2003. And the lyric goes, I forget what the lyric is before it, but the line in question is, hand-delivered matching funeral urns to the bully who never learns. And the matching funeral urns in question there were the Twin Towers. The bully who never learns is the U.S. And yes, like civilians should not be killed, right? That's another one of those things that's like, you can be a dogmatist about that and say that's not something that you should not intentionally kill civilians of any country. But the U.S. is repeatedly and like over and over made this mistake over and over again, where we don't walk what we talk, right? So we don't have the sort of I want to say the turpitude, but really it's a moral turpitude to be able to say this is the example that we're setting. Hopefully, by setting this example, we're holding the world to a higher bar, or the world is holding us to a higher bar. That's the way it's working right now. Is the world is holding the U.S. to a higher bar, as anyone who saw Trump at any of the global summits would know. But the point is, we're really good at negatively influencing the way the world operates. And I'm talking about the U.S. here by setting a very poor example, and that's not disputed. But we're not good at doing the opposite. So Zizek was, talks about there are just things we shouldn't be talking. We shouldn't be giving equal time to. We shouldn't be giving as much. It's not a matter of like good people on both sides, as Trump once said of the Charlottesville rally where the Proud Boys were chanting, "Jews will not replace us." Right? Good people on both sides. Let's hear what they got to say. And while we're at it, like stuff like this takes a bit of another, even more nefarious. It's not even, when I was listening to this in the context of what we were talking about last week, I was thinking like, this is just stupid. In the context of this week, I feel like it's nefarious.
Do you not feel that the amount of time it would take to educate people on all the unfairness that exists between races, and then if we go outside of like racial studies, just anything, do you think the amount of time it takes to educate people on unfairness is actually worth putting in that rather than maybe teaching people how to make money?
More than what we think we deserve.
That was an unintentional McConaughey there. I just meant to play. Oh, I broke my rule. I broke a self-made rule that I made for this week. Shit. I had this rule for this week. No Peterson talk. Let's see if I can beat his head here. The rest of his head. Come on. Come on, man. Doesn't quite work. I broke my rule, but I'm not going to break it anymore. I may play that clip again. That clip and, there was another clip. James Lindsay, who, critical race, critical race critic, or critical race theory critic. I think he was availing himself quite well on the Joe. We haven't even started getting into Joe Rogan, right? But here's James Lindsay. Right? Remember this little beauty?
Like, I don't know if that thing that they just did with the COVID is like panned out or not, but
hold on. I want to loop this. Can I loop it?
It did. That's like, somebody should probably be looking into that. Like, I don't know if that thing that they just did with the COVID is like panned out or not, but if it did, that's like, somebody should probably be looking into that. Like, I don't know if that thing that they just did with the COVID is like panned out or not, but if it did, that's like, somebody should probably be looking into that. Like, I don't know if that.
So the left, the progressive left, needs to be a little less forgiving of insanity. So if we can get back to no-knock warrants. By the way, there were over 1,000 people shot dead by police in 2021, which is the most in the U.S. The most ever since they've been keeping records, since the Post, I think, has been keeping records. Over 1,000 people shot dead. Helicopters flying overhead again. 50% of those people were minorities. Ooh. Come get me. It's very loud. That's got to be like a Chinook or something. That's a big one. Shit. Yeah, I'm not actually worried about myself. Anyway, when they started, their intention was to capture drugs. And so I've done my research here on Wikipedia. I've done quite a bit of research on no-knock warrants. At least I follow up the footnotes. I make sure that the sources are either peer-reviewed sources or otherwise credible sources. So in the 80s, the average for no-knock warrants were 1,500 a year. And they were part of the war on drugs, which pretty good band, but fucking horrible idea. Why would we bring that into the equation? That's one of those things. It's like, that should not have been brought into the equation. We were sold this ridiculous bill of goods in the 80s that drugs were doing way more damage than we thought they were doing, that marijuana was a gateway drug to all kinds of other, distracted, to all kinds of other drugs and criminal behavior as a result. And now it's 50 to 60,000 a year. 50 to 60,000 no-knock warrants are executed a year. Do you know what state doesn't allow no-knock warrants? Well, Virginia doesn't, which I live in. So great. I'd never get a no-knock warrant because of this mug. But also Florida doesn't have no-knock warrants, which I was very surprised by. So I know Florida, because I was born and raised in Miami, is very big on stand your ground, right? And I think maybe what happened there is Florida, in a brief moment of lucidity, and possibly in the wake of like the death of Arthur McDuffie, when I was just like a little kid, I have the tiniest memory of the Miami riots that were going on. I lived in like the cloistered middle upper class houses of Coral Gables. Like if you look up Coral Gables, Florida, like banyan trees covering the roads, golf courses, or the house was on a golf course and country club down there. It was sickening, the early part of my life in terms of the privilege that I didn't even recognize as privilege, and I would get outraged when things didn't go my way, when I would get yelled at or not yelled at even, but like reprimanded for charging too much to the Riviera Country Club in Coral Gables, charging too much to the ticket. I'd go there with friends and just like order whatever the hell I wanted, and wouldn't eat half of it, maybe would eat some of it. Used to just eat packets of sugar. I just would grab a bunch of packets of sugar. Like I'm talking about as a kid, right? 7, 8 years old. And I would just put a packet of sugar in my mouth and suck on it. Ridiculous. Oh, so are you telling me, let me ask you, like the helicopter, I understand, like the one that passed, there were 2 helicopters that flew over. The one that flew over earlier, to me, sounded extremely loud. So I'm curious, did nobody hear that helicopter? Did nobody hear the first helicopter that went by? Nobody? Well, I assure you. Okay, Q heard the loud one. All right. Well, the loud one was really loud, a lot louder than it probably seemed to y'all. If you can't hear the soft ones, certainly. And then now I'm off track. But so there were, there was riots in Miami when the police beat and killed Arthur McDuffie. I remember his name. I remember at the time. I remember being like, what did he do? He led the police on a high-speed chase. Did he deserve to be killed for that? Like even as a kid, I was like, that doesn't seem right? Like, but anyway, so Florida had really strong stand your ground, or I think still has really strong stand your ground laws, and a lot of people in Florida, not Texas numbers, but not too far off, have guns and are very much like, get off my land. Especially in northern Florida. It's one of the paradox of Florida is the further south you go in Florida, really the more north you're going in terms of political ideologies. But even in Miami, there's plenty of those types. And what was once considered like a Democrat bastion, which would be Miami-Dade County, was actually in play during Trump. So it's very, very, a lot of stuff moving, a lot of moving parts there. But it seemed clear that like, okay, so, in this moment of lucidity, Florida was like, you know what is a bad idea is how permissive we've been with gun ownership and stand your ground laws, mixing that with no-knock warrants. That seems like a bad idea. That seems like that's going to cause like out and out, firefights almost every time it happens. Do they? I think they execute no-knock warrants in Texas, which is, I would think, that would never go well. Anyway, those two things just kind of seem like they shouldn't be in the same timeline, the same universe. Like they're bizarro versions of, you have no-knock warrants in one dystopia and you have very strong Second Amendment rights and lots of personal gun ownership in another. Can't bring those things together. It's like matter and antimatter. I don't know if everybody has watched the video of Amir Locke being shot and killed. There's body cam footage of it. To this day, like I'm really, really surprised. Although, you have body cameras that fail at very suspicious times. But I'm really surprised that police officers wear body cams as often and for as long as they do, and how often that those cams and the cam footage gets out, and how often that footage is extremely incriminating. In this case, I looked at it and I was like, this is ridiculous, right? They didn't. So from the video, I'm going from my memory of the video. From the video, they had a key, right, from the landlord. They opened the door. They were quiet about it. They didn't get loud until the door opened and they started yelling, "Police search warrant, police search warrant." My understanding, it was early in the morning. I'm not sure exactly what time it was, but everybody in the house was basically asleep. So one, like, this has been used by criminals as a way to just break and enter into houses. And two, the idea is to catch people unaware. So literally it's manufactured to be like, okay, let's time this so that we'll break into people's houses. They'll be asleep. They'll be disoriented. If you're asleep and you own a gun and it's by your bedside or under your mattress or wherever it is, I think you would keep it close by. Right? Somebody breaks into your house, it doesn't fucking matter what they're yelling, especially if you're being woken from REM sleep. In a matter of seconds, you have them on you. Who wouldn't at that point like go for your gun and be like, fuck, I'm being attacked, like I'm under siege. But from the video, he did grab a gun. He was under a blanket on the couch. I don't know if he was a guest or if he lived there in any permanent way. Grabbed the gun and was shot. It didn't even look like he got the blanket like off his head, or he maybe had just gotten it off his head. So it didn't seem like he was able to process, or he did not have enough time to process what was going on before he was dead. He was asleep. He woke up to what sounded like a bunch of thugs breaking into his apartment, or the apartment that he was at. He had a gun at hand. He grabbed it. He was dead. I mean, it's, I don't know if it's as bad as Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor, I don't know. Actually, I don't even really know how to like put them up against each other. But Breonna Taylor was another victim of a no-knock warrant. I don't care who you are. If you're a group of people break into your house, guns drawn, I don't care if they have a patch that says sheriff on the front. Right? Like, what are you going to do? You're going to defend yourself. That to me, like, it's very clear what he was doing was trying to defend himself. Like, and then the rush of people like try and find out, did this guy have priors? What quickly, we have to mitigate this PR disaster that we've created for ourselves by killing an innocent human being. Maybe he was a criminal. And if we can do that, and if we can show that and illustrate it, then it's going to make the rest of this ordeal, it's going to make us able to discredit his motives and make it seem like, oh no, he was intending what? There were like 8 cops with some high caliber weapons there. You really think he was going to like, his thought was, here, let me take out all of these people? He was really just, he was in the moments when your body wakes up before your mind. I mean, the only mercy there is that it happened so quickly. He probably didn't have much time to be in a state of complete terror. It's fucking ridiculous. It's disgusting. There's no reason to have no-knock warrants. What you lose when you lose no-knock warrants, you lose the ability to seize drugs. Who gives a fuck? Who gives a fuck? Like, drugs on the table, right? Like, nobody should care about that. That should not be given. That is one of the things that should not be given air in the room, right? The trade-off should never be, well, people are going to die, but we'll seize more drugs, especially marijuana. And the majority of no-knock warrants today are served for marijuana possession and intent to distribute. Being fair. And I think even more irony there. Like, how ironic is it? How ironic is it? Like, let's compare what we were just talking about, Amir Locke, with fucking, it's not gonna focus. Hold on, let me grab it. I can't grab it. There's actually a lot more space there than it looks like. That's Kyle Rittenhouse crying on the stand, back there, out of focus. So, Kyle Rittenhouse transported an AR-15 across state lines, brought it to a protest, brandished it, did not have any indication that he was a police officer, because he wasn't. He's not a police officer. So in a high tension situation, he thought a good idea would be to brandish a high caliber assault rifle. He shot people, killed people. Why did this happen? Like, if you believe what the same verdict that the jury came to, which I'm still a bit in shock about. I gotta learn to ignore these things. I'm still in shock about this verdict, but they believed that he was in fear for his life. There was what the jury statement was. They believed, and it was a key tenet of the defense, was that Kyle Rittenhouse was in fear for his life. So how was Amir Locke not in fear for his life? Like, how can you say that in one case you had somebody who was not a police officer bring a rifle across state lines to a already very tense, tensions were high. And why were tensions high? I forget. Why were tensions high there? Like, this just seems to me like when you look at it as a whole, how can anybody look at this and not say, okay, well, the solution to this is stop killing minorities. Stop killing everybody. But because these laws, which are not purportedly not racist in the letter, end up targeting minorities to a very unfair extent, maybe that's where we focus. And how is Black Lives Matter not like the embodiment of that? And how can anybody look at the situation as a whole and say, well, white lives matter too? I don't get it. Amy, is this what Amir Locke had? It looked like a small handgun. I couldn't. I mean, the resolution on the video was pretty poor. But whatever. We have a Second Amendment. It's not a great neighborhood. He had caused more than 90, and it's cause created by the very system that ended up killing him. I don't get it. Absolutely, Q. I'm with you. 100%. Let me say hi to everybody real quick. Hi, Q. Hi, Colorful Dreams. Amy. Let me bring this over. I can read it easier. Elxie, how are you doing, Elxie? Warp Raven. Oh, hey. Warp Raven. As people know, probably, Warp Raven does 3D prints or foam core cutouts, or she creates 3D cosplay elements or replicas of elements. And she did a set of knives. Were they for The Witcher? I don't recall offhand. That looked incredible. Incredible. If you don't follow Warp Raven on Instagram, you're missing out on stuff. Hey KJ, how are you doing? Oh, KJ, you're working tonight. So you're gone at this point, maybe, but maybe listening. Okay. Cleaning an operating room. Oh gosh. Didn't you call in once from your job? I think, and you were in I think you were in a doctor's office though, not a operating room, if I remember correctly. There's a lot going on. Having trouble keeping up with the world. Hey, Nick. Good to see you. Pivy. Why is Pivy from where the wild things are? I'm not sure. Katerina, hi. Hi, Ava. Knock. Yeah. I'm such a dork. I looked at this and I thought, Electrum pieces. Happy 60 Electrum pieces. Is Electrum even a valid currency in Dungeons and Dragons anymore, or did that go the way of crypto? Kitty Cat, hi, how are you doing? LQ, it's been a while, LQ. It's good to see you. I like this, Pivy. I don't have an outrage, I have an enrage. much the same, right? Like I tend to keep it bottled up. It's one of the myriad functions that this live stream allows me to get out of my system. It allows me to vent about what a terrible, horrible place the world has become. You wouldn't know it by looking at me now. But when I was younger, when I was in bands, I didn't open this and now it's warm. When I played in bands, some of the members of those bands may or may not have, in Minecraft, also dealt drugs. Made a lot more money there than ever made in a band. Yeah, it kind of looks a little bit like a vodka bottle, but no. Yeah. Well, here I am saying, I don't feel like making jokes about it is something I can do, and yet literally, like I titled this episode, a joke. Yeah, I agree here, Alexi, right? I mean, I don't even think that's enough. I mean, driving a car is also a very dangerous thing. Matty G, it's good to see you. Legit Soft advocates for the death penalty for non-state actors in Colombia for advocating for prison reform. Oh, okay. I got to follow the thread here, don't I? Got to follow the thread. So your EMS, so your emergency medical service text advocates for the death penalty for non-state actors in Colombia because they were advocating for prison reform? How can they possibly get that in? Below 20 below. Hey, tuning in after a while of ignoring this show for some comfort. Just got some with an active shooter near campus. This stream is a godsend. Yeah, in DC, there were 6 schools evacuated today because of bomb threats. And there was another school evacuated yesterday in DC for a bomb threat because the second gentleman was there. Kamala Harris's husband was there. I don't understand the relationship between that incident and the 6 today, unless maybe someone was like, hey, I mean, sometimes you have kids who have very poor judgment, and to them a day out of school is worth whatever the risk is. And I can't really say, like when I was young, when I was a kid, I did some really stupid shit. Like my ideas of what, I didn't really have much of a moral compass, and I did feel like a pretty good sense of entitlement that I didn't even recognize existed. Right? It took me, and I wish that I could say, like, although, like I said, like when I heard that Arthur McDuffie had been killed, I had like there was a part of me that was like, well, that's definitely wrong, and we shouldn't let stuff like that happen. But it's probably more complicated than I understand because I am only 8 and the adults have a much better understanding of right and wrong than I do. No, turns out, it circles back around, and sort of your initial instincts when it comes to the ethics of good and evil tend to be pretty spot on, don't they? Unless you're perverted at a very early age. certainly seems to be the case for me. Until I get through the political segment. Well, oh, Maddie, I hope you feel better. I hope it's nothing serious. Kitty Cat, did I say hi to Kitty Cat? I think I did. And Katerina said hi to Katerina. If anybody wants to talk about any of this stuff, you all know where to go. Go to ridge.com, buy a Ridge wallet, and inscribe it with, I would like to talk to Phoenician Sailor about no-knock warrants. Show me the evidence, and then we can chat. Seriously, yeah, nobody ever buy a Ridge wallet. I'm talking about Ridge wallets too much. I love my Ridge wallet. I genuinely now I have become acclimated to it. Do I have anything here that's gonna? I've become acclimated to it. I no longer freak out about like the feeling like I've forgotten my wallet when I leave the house. But this should not cost $125. This should be $40, if that. And I understand. Just like with NFTs, ideas have value. Right? The amount that you pay for something is borne out by, it's multivariate. So there's, factors of cost, physical cost, labor cost, the material cost, right? And the labor cost. And then, innovation costs secured by patents or what have you. But there are tons of wallets now that are just like this you can get for $30. And I would go that way. Pivy, I'm feeling, I don't want to jinx it, but like I've been feeling better the past few weeks. I think, as most of you know, I was pretty down end of the year, beginning of the year. And I still have my moments, right? They have not been eradicated or anything, but across the board, I think I feel a little better. So that's been allowing me to be motivated and, wanting to do more, accomplish more, whether that's, more streaming or whatever it is, right? All right, let me catch up now because I've been hanging out in the back. Romachek 75, how are you doing? Yeah, there's no law, certainly not in the states that I've lived in, but I don't think there's laws about it. If you can carry your gun in your car, you have to have certain safety measures in place so that you can't just grab it and shoot. But they vary from state to state. But in your house, I don't think you're required by law to have, like, say, a trigger lock, at least not in most states. In the US, they found that a high IQ is correlated to corruption and insubordination. It makes sense. It makes perfect sense. It's the two sides of that coin. Yep, exactly, Nick. Right. This is what, yeah. I mean, the only improvement you get is drug retrieval, and we shouldn't care about that. We should not care about that because of shit. I swore I had this. But maybe I don't have it. No? Can I just pop? What if I just pop it here? Let's see what happens here. All right, this could be bad. Let's see what happens when I do this.
Je bilo tudi javno izreči to samo pravilo prepoved.
So
In
this is Slavoj Zizek.
najposebnejše spremembe se dogajajo, pod spremembami mislim to rahljanje tkiva družbenega, ko te implicitne prepovedi odpovejo, recimo mučenje. A se sploh zavedamo, da oblasti so vedno mučile, diskretno.
And this is exactly what I was talking about, right? So
Tako je nekje že pod Bushem, pod Trumpom pa sploh, je to postalo legitimna tema
yeah,
diskusije.
how is torture a
Po mojem
legitimate
mora
topic
biti
of discussion?
prepoved mučenja in isto bom rekel, seveda med drugim za posilstvo žensk. To je nekaj, o čemer se ne razpravlja. Jaz sem rad dogmatik. A bi vi radi živeli v družbi, kjer bi morali v neki racionalni diskusiji stalno znova dokazovati, da se žensk ne sme
Okay, now I think
posiljevati?
I understand
To je
the
že
point that he's
patološka
making.
družba. Tako da bi začel s prvo mojo provokativno tezo, zdravje družbe se miri.
That's an interesting point. If we say that the health of a society is measured by positive dogmas, let me hide this for a moment. I completely agree with that.
S pozitivnimi dogmami. Da je nekaj tako očitno, da recimo, če bi jaz živel v družbi, to je družba, v kateri bi jaz rad živel, kjer bi jaz kot provokator dokazoval, da se žensk ne sme posiljevati, pa to.
Wait, is he say, I think he means to say, was this mistranslated? As a provocateur trying to argue for would be redundant. Oh no, argue against would be redundant. Yes, okay,
Bi
got
bilo
it.
to
Yes.
odvečno, oziroma če bi dokazoval, obstoji neokusna argumentacija, da ženske.
Okay, let's not. Okay. He's going into, how do I delete this now? I successfully imported it. I'm going to hit the delete button, but I don't know what that's going to do. Didn't do shit. All right, we might get a... All right, that worked. That was perfect. That's exactly what I wanted it to do. Fantastic. So yeah, that's what I was referring to when I was talking about Zizek being Zizek. I even called it Zizek being Zizek. So what else happened in the past week? Other stuff happened. I finally got to see Red Rocket, which is Sean Baker's new movie. Sean Baker wrote and directed Tangerine, which had some acclaim and some notoriety because it was shot on iPhones, entirely on iPhones. And it looks like it, but he's so good. Like, I don't know. His DP is good, but I think it's mostly him. He did the Florida Project, which I fell in love with. I thought that was like a beautiful representation of the people living on the outskirts of Disney World. And I thought it served as like a great metaphor for Disney World being any affluent place and the outskirts being, any of the less affluent or poor suburbs or urban areas. And so his new movie, Red Rocket, was shot entirely on Arriflex 16mm film. And the film is beautiful. It is like, it's as beautiful as the Florida Project, if not more beautiful. Like just every frame of it, it's grainy, but grainy in like the way it should be. Like there's not chroma grain going on. It's more like luminance grain. So you don't see like, the grain would not be like a pixel of green here, right? It would just be some variant. It's like dithering, or stippling in drawing, the kind of the good film grain that you get. He flouts convention when it comes to like things that you shouldn't do when you're shooting a movie. Like, you shouldn't have fluorescent lighting. There's a bunch of like these rules. It's just like, no, this is just a no-no because, you know, it doesn't look right, but it looks awesome. However, having said all that, the movie was itself, like the story was a bit of a letdown. It seemed like it had maybe a strong initial premise, but it turned into sort of a older dude hooking up with a barely legal, which this is what this. I mean, it had a very genuine quality to it. It wasn't the sort of Woody Allen territory, which also it's Woody Allen. Right? So the truth there comes from the man himself, not from the subject matter as it exists in the world outside of him. And I don't know, Sean Baker, maybe I don't know. I can't endorse him or denounce him because I don't know. But the movie is great to look at, like just to look at frame by frame or shot by shot, if you're into that. And, you know, the story had some good parts to it, but it was a letdown after the Florida Project. The Florida Project was better. So I watched that, enjoyed it, but didn't love it, but was like, how much I was totally doing me immediately after Red Rocket, or even while it was still playing. It was Arriflex 16 cameras, eBay. Okay. Oh, wow. You can get an Arriflex 16 camera for like $1,000. But of course, the problem with film cameras isn't the initial cost of investment into bodies. It's cost of film and developing film. And I have enough problem just putting something in Premiere. So, liked the movie, didn't love it, but the man knows. Hey, Grace, how are you doing? It's good to see you. How have you been? Amy, your grandmother slept with a gun under her pillow. Paulo Mima, I think I didn't say hi to you, but hi. How are you doing? So I was reading. Mafarath. Hi. Good to see you. Playing what? Wait, what game are you all talking about? Oh. Okay. Well, why play dating sims when you can play dating realities? I'm not going to get into my personal life. Well, I'm not currently dating anybody, but I am on dating apps, and I have oh boy. I think I've brought this up before. I am banned on Tinder and Hinge, which are like the two. Well, I mean, Tinder is still the big one. Hinge seemed like a classier Tinder, but I'm permanently banned on both of them. And I even went so far, I should not admit this, I even went so far as to add a virtual number to my phone. But guess what? They know that. They don't allow that. And I have no idea why I'm banned. With Hinge, I've never even spoke to anybody. Well, I've talked about this. I do think I know why I'm banned. I think it's because I had used like maybe an image from a thumbnail as one of the photos, and they reverse looked up and then assumed that I was a fake account or something. That's what I'm guessing. Hey, Erebus, how are you doing? But yeah, so I've tried a few, and they're I wasn't planning on talking about this. Tried a few different ones, and most of them are just all bots, right? They're just horrible. Really, like Bumble's the only one that seems to have real people on it. Indigo, oh my gosh, this is like a reunion. So good to see you all. Indigo, what's going on with your, if you don't mind, can you talk about your living situation, if that's changed at all? When last you checked in, there were some issues going on there. You joined eHarmony and they don't allow you to exchange emails or anything. They want you to pay for it. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is just monetized and microtransactions essentially for visibility, which is kind of what I originally wanted to talk about. Yeah, I tried this, Indigo. I tried this, and it's not for me. Not for me. Hi, Isra. How are you doing? It's good to see you too. Gosh, there's a bunch of people here who I haven't seen in the same place for a while now. And I agree, Q. I saw this thread. So Q wrote a great thread, I thought, a very illustrative thread about how you should behave and how you should go about conducting yourself when you're commissioning artwork or whatever it is that you're doing online. I thought it was really well elucidated. I only liked the first one, Q. I didn't go to every entry in the thread and like it. Yeah, Facebook dating is, you can just do it through Facebook, but I don't even like being on Facebook at all anymore. And yeah, it just did not seem like the dating thing was going to pan out there. But I also get discouraged very easily, and no, I don't know. I'm not. I'm just mentioning it. It's one of the things that made me sort of think about data some more. And that's originally what I wanted to talk about before the Minneapolis police murdered Amir Locke, was data and the new age of what is being called by some of techno-feudalism. Yes, they are. They are. Mafarath, yeah. Yeah, you're often like self-selecting vulnerable people there. Just like, I mean, in a lot of areas that happens. And if they think that, giving, and they're not cheap. Like I've seen, the offers come up, right? It's not like $9 a month. It's like $39 a month or something like that. You get 30 likes a day, Indigo. I'm not surprised. I'm glad you get 30 likes a day. How many of those are worth a damn? Pivy, that's interesting. You've never met anyone on purpose. It's always been by accident. That's ideal, right? Like that's kind of the way it should happen. Certainly it seems like the most organic. I mean, this is becoming more and more, I mean, it's totally accepted now, I suppose, but there was a time when It was very looked down on if you used dating apps. Indigo, that's actually a really good ratio. That's a good ratio. 6%. 6% of the likes you get are worth a damn. It's much better than what I get. Anyway, do we want to talk about that? I'm not sure I want to talk about that. What I wanted to talk about more was data. I like how you, in a comment like this, you're showing both, somehow showing humility and also arrogance simultaneously. Part of the charm. So I don't think that would happen, Indigo. I think my filters would be very different than your filters. Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to be able to leave this up, am I? I'm going to have to take this down. Not dates, data. I think about data a lot because it's part of my job. Thinking about data is part of my job. Thinking about using data responsibly is part of my job. Which is extremely difficult because data is bigger than we are. I'm transitioning into data, by the way. Oh, Indigo, how dare you? No, I filter out smartasses. Actually, no, I would filter in smartasses. That would be, if there was a smartass. Do you prefer smartasses? I would be clicking that. Yeah, I'm joking, but I'm not going to take it down. And as long as we're now steering away from dating into data. So responsible data. You all keep talking about dating apps. I'm going to talk about data. We can do the thing that we do where we have parallel conversations going on. And I'll come back and check in every once in a while during my ranting. What's the problem with responsible data? We've talked about it before. Can anybody tell me the problem with responsible data? The problem with the idea of responsible data, or one of the big problems, is all my opinion. I mean, some of it is backed up with some small amount of work experience, but not that much. There you go, Erebus. Yeah. Erebus, can you say what you, when you're referring to that, like, are you referring to, I don't know if your art is your work. So I don't know if you have a different job. Yes, that's true. Yeah, and this is part of it, right? But who decides? But it's not even like, yeah, there you go, right? Like, nobody has the ability to know. We don't have the context or knowledge to know how to behave ethically when it comes to data collection, what we keep, what we mark as significant or not significant. We don't. Oh, I didn't know this, Erebus. You might have said it. I probably should have known it. Sorry that I didn't. I want to say that sounds like it might be difficult. A little bit difficult. I'm talking about all kinds of data. I'm talking about every possible data point you can think of. Like right now, this is how the world is operating, right? Everybody is trying to collect as much data as possible, and we don't know what it's going to be used for. It's speculative data mining, because we're talking about. There's that saying about like any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. It's kind of the same thing with like this data. We're collecting data with the idea that maybe one day this data will be useful. I don't know if anybody here watches Peep Show or that Mitchell and Webb look. David Mitchell, Robert Webb, they have this skit that I find hilarious. I should have clipped it. I didn't clip it, but I should have clipped it. But it's basically, I think it's Robert Webb. Robert Webb is playing like a prognosticator, and it's set back in medieval times. And Robert Webb's playing a prognosticator. David Mitchell is his patron, and the prognosticator comes in with like things that are so far ahead of their time that they just seem stupid and completely inconceivable as to what their purpose could be. So he comes in with a little wooden thing that's shaped like a mouse. So he comes in with, like, imagine this, out of wood. And he presents it to his patron. And the patron is like, "What is that?" And he's like, it's a mouse. And patron is like, "That's not a mouse. It's a block of wood." And he goes, "No, this is a mouse for computers." And the patron says, "Well, what's a computer?" So the prognosticator is trying to explain, and even to him, he can't really explain what a computer is. He doesn't have the language to do it, and there would need to be like this generations of knowledge building up to what computers are and how we understand them, that context that this patron lacks. It'd be virtually impossible to bring them up to speed on what the speculative use of this thing is. And the punchline of the skit is near the end, is he kind of says, well, I haven't told you the best part about it. And the patron is like, "Well, what's the best part?" And the prognosticator says, "It's wireless." Which the joke there is, what's a wire? And you're talking about this thing that you don't know why it would need wires or what it would do, or so the fact that it's wireless means absolutely nothing, because we don't have the context yet in that skit, illustrating how we don't have any context to be able to understand these concepts that are just way too far beyond the magistry of what we know right now. We're trapped in the now. So whenever we think about futurism now, we're doing it through the lens of now, which is really, really limiting, right? So, and it's limiting regardless. It's not just data, right? It's limiting when we're talking about anything that we have no knowledge of. It's limiting when we're talking about extraterrestrial life. Anything we can't cobble together using paradigms we're already familiar with. Hey, Olevi, it's good to see you. This is the first time in a while, I think, that so many regulars have been here at the same time. Often, see you, some of you one week, some of you the next week. But it's nice to see you all here for episode 60, which feels significant. some way. Isn't that the age at which you can start collecting retirement? I don't know. But anyway, so to get back to data, our brains are super powerful, obviously, really powerful. We don't understand how powerful they are. They're also ridiculously pattern dependent. We're really good at recognizing things like bilateral symmetry, right? And that it's no coincidence, right? Like some of the things that our brains are really good. I mean, you could look at any piece of wood right now. Let's take this, my beard brush. You could take this piece of wood. Well, no, you can't. Let's see if this, come on, buddy. Old school. I gotta hide it. It's doing face tracking. Don't track face. There we go. Oh, might be at the minimum focus range of this lens. Yeah, it's not going to work for this thing. But the point is, like, you could probably look at the grain of most wood, and if you look at it for a little bit, you could probably find a face, because we're really good at like identifying faces. From an evolutionary standpoint, we had to be really good at identifying faces. We had to recognize like who people are and whether they were friend or foe, whether they were people or not. And it was like the recognition fueled the evolution of the face and vice versa, right? Faces, I mean, 2 eyes, a mouth, and a nose, like you can represent that in just a couple of simple shapes. I know, like when I was testing like the facial recognition of, it might have been this camera. Yeah, it was this camera. All it took was me drawing like 3-4 shapes, and it saw it as a face. So it's no coincidence that like the same things that cameras and AI driven systems are good at are things that our brains are really good at, and pattern recognition is one of those things. We're good at those things, and we can do them like crazy, which is great because we can use that to create data and augment data, but we can also do it to, what are the ends there? What's the end goal of facial recognition software? Because it's not unlocking your iPhone. That's not the end goal. That is the sugar coating that's put on the bitter pill of losing your identity. But anyway, back to our brains, right? So brains can emulate, they can rearrange, they can put ideas and concepts together in different ways. They can go on tangents based on those ideas, and like you're going down one lane of ideas, and a sort of a new idea appears to you, and you kind of go off on that tangent. Maybe a familiar scenario to most people listening, because I do it all the time. But the point is that tangent was, these were all done incrementally, like steps from here to here to here to here. I didn't just go from point A to point J, right? There was a fork in the road, and I took the fork in the road. I like taking forks in the road, because I mean that's the creative part of your brain sort of being exercised, right? I don't know where I'm going to end up when I do that. It's one of the reasons I don't know if I prefer it. I like doing unscripted stuff for that reason. And it's a lovely thing when at the end of doing something like that, you're like, wow, there's no way that I could have known that that's where it was going to go, that thing was going to go, that's where that thing was going to go. Sometimes you just hit dead ends, right? And that can be anything from mood to there's just not a place for you to jump. You're taking analogies and small steps to evolve from one idea to another. And I know I say this all the time too, but like it's the thought experiment of think of the most bizarre alien life form, or think of an alien life form, like just starting with an alien life form. And usually like the things that people think of are pretty mundane. Just sort of a portmanteau of existing things, and usually they resemble humans quite a bit in the ways we mentioned before, right? The bilateral symmetry, arms and legs and stuff. And then if you break out of that box and you have tentacles or whatever it is, right? Or body of a jellyfish, or you could just exist as a vast neural network of connections like a fungi. And I guess there's two ways to look at that, right? One way is that we suck at coming up with new ideas. All we really do is improve marginally on existing ideas. That's one way of looking at it, and I think it's right. I think it's right. But there is another way to look at it. The other way to look at it is, well, maybe we are coming up with these great leaps of logic, but our brains are really good at then taking those things and breaking them down to their constituent parts and sort of retrofitting the analogies to things that we are familiar with so that we can understand them better. Because you don't understand this, I mean, we call it a mouse, for Christ's sake, right? So maybe but I kind of feel like those are really like two sides of the same way of thinking about things. If we think about something unlike anything that exists, yeah, I think both arguments prove the same point, because it's like the transitive property then, right? Like A equals B, B equals C, therefore C equals A. I believe firmly, I think that there are things in the universe that if we were to encounter them, if you and I were to encounter them, we'd either like not even be aware that we encountered them. And we can't say, are there forms of life that we've encountered that we just don't even know that we've encountered right in front of us that we just can't recognize as life? So maybe things that exist like that we just wouldn't even recognize as a thing to encounter, or things that are so outside the realm of our experience that we would have no ability to communicate what we encountered or the magnitude of its difference to our fellow people. And then again, we're kind of going back to the prognosticator trying to explain the concept of a wireless mouse to a medieval patron. And not only that, so you have two problems there. You not only have the conceptual problem of trying to figure this thing out, you have the language problem, language being a subset of what we can think. So you're further limited by the language that you can use. So you get frustrated. You're just like, it was just can't put a word to it. And I know like we have some very inventive ways of looking at new concepts. And we have some very inventive analogies that serve a point and serve an edifying purpose. I'm thinking of like the way Interstellar represented Gargantua, the black hole that they went through in Interstellar. But then like I think of it some more, and then I think, well, it really was just like an inverted torus. It's just like you were on the inside of a torus. I mean, it looked really cool and interesting, but if we were explaining what we were seeing conceptually, it was an inverted torus. And well, I don't want to spoil Interstellar for anyone who hasn't seen it. fuck, it's been out for 12 years or 10 years, 8 years, whatever it is. The point where he's in the singularity and they represent time as a string, right? It looked really neat. It was done really well. And it's probably the best we can do. And yet we can still kind of look at it and say, well, representing time as a string, it's a little pedestrian. No matter how grandiose it actually appeared on screen, which it appeared really, really grandiose. And these are useful analogies, right? It was like, I don't know how they could possibly have, stop it, Indigo, stop it, please. I can't even, shit. So I got alerted that you sent one. There it is. Well, if that was worth it to you, Indigo, to make that crack about my age and make me sad, I'll take it. Anyway, I don't want to lose this thread. I will come back to stuff like the writing extravaganza. I have not figured out stuff about the writing extravaganza. I do think maybe creative nonfiction's okay, but no, not straight poetry. It has to just be narrative. Like, I think if it's narrative, then it's okay. And then we'll have the it's not no erotica and a word length, but I'll get back to it. Oh, Karan. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce your name, but I think that's what I say. I love your avatar so much. Has anyone heard from Ms., by the way? I'm curious about if everything's okay in the Ukraine. If anyone has, please let me know. Okay, so using Interstellar as an example, and Interstellar is not, I mean, Interstellar really is a great movie, but it really did rip off Contact, which was a movie based on a book by Carl Sagan. Came out just before he died. But a lot of the concepts that they tackled in Interstellar, they tackled in Contact. It wasn't a ripoff. Did I say it was a ripoff? It was influenced. It was influenced by Contact. And I'm sure the Nolan brothers would agree with that. But like in Contact, basically, Jodie Foster's character, Elliot Arroway, went via Vega through a set of wormholes, which were, just kind of stretched you and squished you and looked really neat at the time. And all these concepts were like, wow, this is cool. But when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, look, it's stretch and squish and tunnels. Wormholes are literally tunnels. Whatever. You're right, Indigo was his only fiction book. All of his other books were nonfiction. And they were all great. Some of them were better than others. I liked the ones that, some of the earlier ones honed in on particular concepts. He was writing more like an academic. When he became the incredibly successful popularizer of science that he became, like the Cosmos book, like I wasn't thrilled by that. But then he went with Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors. He went back. He and his new wife, Adrienne, went back, dug into stuff. Demon Haunted World, I thought was fantastic. Isra, yeah, like I actually watched it again comparatively. I can't see everything. You're gonna give me a, what am I? Oh, okay. Good. Thank you for that. But I missed stuff. I'm sorry. What was I going on about? Oh yeah, Demon Haunted World, right? And Demon Haunted World is particularly prescient. It speaks about the danger of a generational decline in the interest in or trusting in the process of the scientific endeavor, which is what happened in the Dark Ages, right? I'm not suggesting that we're entering another period of Dark Ages. I'm suggesting that we have to be careful. Has anyone heard from Caroline? What's going on there? Right. So Demon Haunted World. Okay, I gotta not look at the comments for a few minutes now, or I'm just going to keep getting sidetracked here. Demon Haunted World was very prescient, but that wasn't the point. The point was Contact used the trope of, okay, when Ellie Arroway finally reached the aliens were represented to her as her father, and the explanation was the aliens wanted to present a form that would be acceptable to the humans that they brought. If they were really smart, they wouldn't have chosen her father because her father died in tragic circumstances. They would have chosen generic humanoid, but I think they wanted a little more of that, that emotional punch at the end there. But that's a super convenient trope. It's a get out of jail free card for things that we really just can't represent in any way that would be anything other than corny. I think if you could argue that Denis Villeneuve's Arrival had good aliens, but they were just Cthulhu's. They were just Cthulhu's with a tweak on. They still had a written language. I mean, think about, they were so alien to us when you saw them, but they still had a written language. Wait, what? I acknowledge that you gave me money. I said thank you. You're leaving? Good night, Indigo. I'm glad that your living situation is better. I mean, I hope you're not in a situation where it can just as easily go back the other way again. Having some stability there would be important. But hopefully you have that. Anyway, didn't I say I'm not looking at chat for a little while. So even like The Arrival, which is lauded as being extremely imaginative in its demonstration and realistic by NASA scientists or whomever it was that consulted on that. It's still really just like they were big and there was a lot of fog, but they were squid heads basically with eyes, and they shot squid ink to do their writing. It was very much like this is very representable in things that we know already. I liked the little time tweak idea, but my point is these were ideas that were built on existing ideas, and that's the only way that it can be, right? We have to do that. Otherwise, we're not really going to understand what we're seeing, or it's going to be super corny, as I mentioned, right? And so that trope where it's like, we're going to represent ourselves to you in a way that you can understand makes budgets go down when you do that, right? You don't need to spend as much money. Now, the problem that I have with analogies is how easy it is to take an analogy that's meant to illustrate one aspect of something that's difficult to communicate. So, in the instance of the strings, right, with in Interstellar representing time existing through some sort of matter. I think I saw Erebus saying string theory. I don't really think it was a representation of string theory. String theory, in my understanding, is something different. Although they were strings. But it was like a representation of time. If you then looked at that and you tried to apply it to something else, it might not hold up. So like when I was a kid, the first time I saw one of those models of a subatomic particle, and you see the protons and the neutrons all clustered together and the electrons orbiting outside. When I first saw that, I was like, oh my God, has nobody realized that that's what a solar system is like? Hey, what if the sun is really, what if our solar system is really just a subatomic particle in a grander universe that we can never see? And being very young, I was naive enough to think like, am I the first person who's ever thought this? But that analogy like just falls down completely unless you're thinking about it strictly from the idea of, hey, you want a quick and ready sort of idea of how to understand how subatomic particles can be represented in a macro way. You could think of the solar system, and you could think of the planets as electrons, and you could think of the sun as the nucleus. It doesn't work for a lot of other reasons. It doesn't represent the strong force. It doesn't. There's a million things it doesn't do. So if you then try and say like, well, gravity is the nuclear force, that doesn't work, and it's not true, and things fall apart. So it's the danger. It's like the kind of slippery slope of analogies when you take an analogy and you then try and apply it beyond the one sort of concept it was meant to illustrate. These are beautiful truths killed by ugly facts. And that's a problem too, right? Because maintaining, I think for anybody, like when you have an idea and it seems revolutionary, it seems like everything fits at first, right? Just like everything feels right, and you get this, you can conceptualize it and you kind of feel it coming together. You're biasing the hell out of yourself. And the desire to sort of maintain, you're going to start looking for ways to explain things that don't break that model down that you built in your head. And the more work you put into it, the more sunk cost you have there, and the less you want to lose it. I have this idea. It explains things so well. I don't want it to go away. Maybe there's another way I can explain gravity and the nuclear force that would allow these things to be reconciled with each other. Maybe. But bam, you're biased. Like right the moment something like that comes up, you're biased. So that was a tangent also. Point was we're not very good at prognosticating, except in a way that is like very linearly going from A to B to C to D. And those intelligence tests where it's like 1, 3, 5, 7, what's the next number, right? Like if it's something like that, we're great. Go 9, right? But if the easily becomes very unpredictable, even if there is like a pattern there, a very definite pattern underlying it, and it's one pattern. Like some of those give me the next number in the sequence puzzles are incredibly difficult to discern the pattern, but there's still one pattern there. You imagine, a universe of possible interacting patterns, not just double the number and subtract 6, divide by 2 and add the remaining. Like it would require pages and pages, if you could even represent it in any sort of algebraic way, which you might not be able to do. Like that's assuming that you can. So super, super difficult to predict the future. And for that very reason, like we're really bad at looking at data and saying, this data is useless. Like I think we're really good at looking at data and saying this data is useful. Like, we're good at recognizing in the now what data can be used to predict behavior, which is ultimately like kind of one of the large functions of why we want to collect data, is to be able to predict human behavior and leverage that for capitalism, most likely. But we're really bad at predicting. We're really bad at saying this data is not useful. We may be able to even, I don't even think we're that great at saying this data is not useful now, but we're horrible at saying this data is just blanket not useful. I think it's very possible that any data point, like even like the data point you might think is like the most ridiculous thing, could still be useful at some point in the future, but we don't have all the context that you need to understand why a mouse is cool and why a wireless mouse is even cooler. Right? I mean, the gulf between that data being useless and that data being useful could be entire industries coming into being, heretofore non-existent and not even like thought of. Right? So we can't look at data, I think, and say this is useless data with any kind of reliability. And so, I mean, it follows pretty naturally, and since we're good at like going from point A to point B, that being point A, point B is then, so it follows really naturally that why would we be able to claim to be responsible with data or AI if we can't even label data as significant or not? If we're supposed to be curators, we have to be able to distinguish between what's important and what's not important. And at least we should be honest about it. Like we could say we're trying to be good custodians, but like there's just no way to know if we're collecting data that is useless today that could be used for some nefarious purpose in the future. I know I bring up the Roomba example a lot, but that's I think it's a good example. And I still do not believe that when Roomba came up with their mapping system by which they map out the space in which they vacuum, I don't think that they were trying to collect like valuable data about people's homes with the goal of turning a profit. I think they were just genuinely trying to improve the efficiency of their vacuums. Vacuums had to be small, their batteries had to be compact. Running into a bunch of shit when it doesn't need to uses battery life. So they collected all this data. They didn't think they were doing anything wrong by doing that, and they weren't intending to do anything wrong, probably. I'm obviously guessing. But then years later, the opportunity to sell that data came up. And there's not just Amazon or Google or the giant tech powers vacuuming up. I made a funny vacuuming up that data. Right? There are lots of corporations who, like I said before, they're data speculators. They're buying data in the hopes that one day it will be useful. And I think that's a super safe bet. I think what they can't figure out in that bet is when. Maybe this data will become useful in a year. Maybe this data will become useful in 1,000 years. Yeah, for the same reasons that we don't know whether data is useful or not. The best we can do, I think, and just expressing my opinion, is bet that all data could become useful. And if you have a corporation who has a shit ton of data that it's like, I don't know what to do with this shit. What do I care about this piece of data or this data that was supplied to me willingly by my customers? It's probably a little short-sighted on the part of the corporation it's also like strange to me that that's stuff that we do for free for corporations to profit off of. Like, we don't get any of that. Be nice if we did. It'd be nice if when Facebook asked you, or an app asked you, hey, can we track X, Y, or Z? You could say, yeah, you can track X, Y, or Z, but I expect to be compensated for giving you that data. But it doesn't happen. So in the Roomba case, right, like what sort of mischief could low resolution mapping of objects in your home cause? A Roomba knows it hit something, it doesn't know what it hit, right? Wrong, right? That's machine learning, covers that. Machine learning would take that raw data and be able to transform it by being fed like other data sets that it's trained on. So when you're training a machine learning model, you have the training data, which is the training set. You have the test data, which is separate. So you'd collect a bunch of training data that could be existing floor plans, and you get them from real estate corporations, or you get them from condo associations. I don't know where you get them. You get them from a bunch of different places. You could get them from records of sales of objects, and it would not take long before you would be able to train off that data, and your Roomba would then know to a pretty high degree of confidence what it's bumping into. And there's relationship data there too, right? Between objects. So if, it hits something that it evaluates as a table, it then knows, well, there's a higher probability that there's going to be a chair in proximity to this table. And then that data, it's reinforcement learning at that point. It uses the data that it creates or discovers to increase the accuracy of its own model. And so then in that case, right, in the case of Roombas, what you end up with is a low res collision mesh. That's in game developer terms. That's when you're running around in a game, occasionally you might notice that it doesn't seem like you are perfectly standing on the ground. And that's because usually games have meshes, separate collision mesh that determines what is or is not, what can be passed through or what cannot be passed through. And it's lower resolution than the mesh that represents what you see visually. And sometimes if you have like this nice smooth curve of ground, the collision mesh might be a little choppier. So as you're walking up it, maybe it looks a little stair-steppy. And that's because your collision mesh is lower fidelity for optimization reasons, because all that it's needed for is to be able to tell you, well, person can go here, person cannot go here. If person goes here, this is their elevation. If person goes here, this is their elevation, etc. And then you can, once you have that, you can do like innocuous stuff. Like it's basically targeted marketing. So if 99% of apartments have a plant next to their television, and the Roomba determines that, hey, this apartment does not have a plant. Bingo, next time you open Amazon, you are presented with the option to buy a plant. And then you could use reinforcement learning then to see where the plant gets put and see if the plant got put where you predicted it would get put or got put somewhere else. That'd be fun. Some of these problems are really fun to solve. You got to wonder about what the ramifications of solving them are. So those are like those are capitalist targeting reasons why you would collect data like that, right? But then there's nefarious reasons why you collect data like that, or more nefarious, let's say. Greed is nefarious in and of itself. Roomba. In this speculative fiction that I'm weaving right now, Roomba has essentially taken over the world. Okay, so Roomba now knows where your bed is, right? Roomba knows, because of their data sharing policy with the electric company, when all the lights in your house generally get turned out and when they get turned on, when your electricity draws a certain amount. So they know when you go to sleep, and they know where your bed is. So they know where you are, like for a given amount of time. Cars, right? You have cars that track when you start them in the morning. You can even set them to warm up if you know you're going to get in your car to go to work at 7:30 every morning or whatever it is. Have it auto start and warm up. But even if it doesn't do that, it's very easy on those key fobs, right? They track a lot of that data there. So know when you're home, know when you're sleeping in your bed, know where your bed is, probably know like where your head is on your bed. And, well, if someone wanted to kill you with a drone, that'd be useful information. And I get that sounds conspiratorial and a little preposterous. Maybe it doesn't start with citizens, just like the Patriot Act sort of brought the rules of war, home. I mean, I don't know all the things that you could do with that information, but I would guess you could do some pretty fucking scary stuff. And data is also, and this is the thing, right? So all this stuff is being developed, just like when we were talking about cryptocurrency, right? And we were talking about NFTs and the possibility that like there could be a huge windfall for a lot of people from these things. But where's that windfall going to go? It's going to go to people who have the ability to take those risks. And those people are usually going to be people with money. So those are going to be the same people that benefit from technology like this. I read an article a couple weeks ago. I knew this already, but I wasn't 100% clear on like some of the specifics of it. But in some states, you have to pay to be incarcerated. So the way that we criminalize poverty, right? There's a lot of ways that we criminalize poverty. Even like parking tickets are a way to criminalize poverty. If you live somewhere where you can't afford to have parking in front of your apartment, and you then park somewhere where your car gets towed, that's criminalizing poverty. But yeah, so there are states where penitentiaries can charge you for like hotels for staying there. And then not only that, they can rearrest you if you don't pay up. It could be considered like breaking parole. So it seems to me like just a no-brainer. Any mechanism where we provide additional information to those who are the controlling interests now, what is in the interest of the people who have controlling interests now? It is in their interest to wield the power they have to prevent themselves from losing the power that they have. And that means preventing others from getting it, and that's oppression. And this kind of comes back to Amir Locke, right? Like what a great controlling faction asset it would be for the police to have a map of your home and your routines and your schedule if they were trying to execute a no-knock search warrant. I know I realize the fault in that logic there about, well, poor and the marginalized don't typically have Roombas. But that's like when we talk, this is why, like when we talk about when billionaires say, but look how much money I'm giving away. Look how philanthropic I'm being. Corporations are like Google or like, look at how we're making these Chromebooks available for so cheap, pennies on the dollar. We're providing them to very poor countries. All these laptops, and we see that as like, we're supposed to see it as like, wow, what a wonderful philanthropic gesture. They really are looking out for the underdog. It's hard to argue against free stuff like that. But we give something. It's not free. We give stuff up for it. And what we give up is the data of how people behave in very targeted situations. And we're just like everybody else in that we don't know what data is important. So we don't know how valuable the data we're giving away is, or how it could be weaponized against us in the future. And the marginalized Roomba example, that cuts both ways, right? By having a Roomba, you are self-identifying as someone who has disposable income usually. And so that's data too. It's like, there's models for everything. And here you go. Yeah. Like we don't need to, nobody needs to develop a vaccine with an incredibly intricate, easy to fail tracking mechanism. We will happily put those mechanisms in our pockets and never leave them and spend 5 or 6 hours a day on them and feel like we're being watched out for when we're sold on the premise that, well, if I'm ever in trouble, I got my phone with me. Whoa. Oh my God, Bob Saget's cause of death was head trauma. Look, I'm being sucked in to the very device I was just decrying. Huh. I think everyone was assuming a heart attack, but head trauma. Wow. Strange. Yeah, Bob Saget died, yeah. So then, I got more. Yeah. It is a little sus. I mean, probably hit the back of his head on something. Maybe slipped in the shower, something like that. Yeah, went to sleep with a concussion, which you're not supposed to do, but also, like, he probably felt okay. That's terrible. It's terrible because it probably could have been prevented. Yeah, Leah, me too. Had scooter accidents where I've hit my head. Yeah, some kind of hematoma or something. I don't know. That's interesting. Let me, if I just put in my social security number, I think I can get more information about it. 6418 Every time you do this, you're contributing to the data set of faces. And what's happening now is the techno-feudalism part of it, which is really being espoused and sort of brought, yes, Grace, this is Natasha Richardson. I don't think she thought nothing of it, though. No, I think she actually had the accident skiing and went to the hospital and died. Like, I think that just happened fairly quickly. I don't think it was something that she didn't know and then just went about her life with. I think she, if I remember correctly, it was like her first skiing lesson or something was like really, I mean, not that it would have been any better. It was her. It's a shame it wasn't her 8th skiing lesson. That I could understand, but the fact that it was her first makes it all the more tragic. Yeah, right. Like we're this complex system. And this is what feeds my hypochondriasis, right? It's like there's so much that can go wrong and so little that it takes. Oh my gosh, syncope. Ava, was this recent? She apparently wouldn't talk about Liam at all. Wait. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, it's been some time. Anyway, that's my data spiel. And to sum it all up, we could all die at any moment. Yeah, Ava, if this was recent, syncope's no joke. Fainting. Losing blood pressure and fainting. Oh, it was a year ago, and it hasn't recurred? I assume it hasn't recurred, or you would say. Jeez. Anyway, I have a whole lot of other stuff I wanted to talk about. My voice is starting to go, but it was basically the fact that like now we're getting to this area where techno-feudalism is coming into it, and we're consolidating the power of who gets marketed what or how data is surfaced to whom, not by, say, the accuracy of the machine learning algorithm that allows us to know what people want or need or are doing in any given moment, but by just selling that space to the highest bidder and playing that game where it's like, it's like a gambit. Like, is the customer going to notice that we're not, in Amazon's case, like we're not surfacing the thing they actually need, but we're surfacing the sponsored version that maybe is like a little less, if we were just going on the accuracy of the model, we'd present you with something else, but we got ad dollars from X, Y, or Z, so we're surfacing this. And consolidating the places where that happens means that like we're even more at the mercy of tech giants. What was it? There was one other thing I wanted to show before I go, which I thought was very funny. And no, it's not this.
Like, I don't know if that thing that they just did with the COVID is like panned out or not, But if it did, that's like somebody should probably be looking into that. Like, I don't know if that thing that they just did with the COVID is like panned out or not. But if it did, that's like somebody should probably be looking into that. Like, I don't know.
Sorry, I think that's freaking hilarious. Fuck James Lindsay. Pretty successful. No more Peterson tonight. So I read this article on CNN a few days ago, and I don't know what, like, this just made me weep. So the article is entitled, Why It Feels Like Movies Are Getting Longer. Do I need to can I go to there we go. Camera 2. Why it feels like movies are getting longer. Someone wrote an article about this. It's very important. So, what is it referring? It must be talking about like something insidious here, like something. There must be some hidden thing that it's referring to that's making it feel like movies are longer. Maybe like the way movies are structured now, they seem to be longer, or they feel longer, but they're not longer, but they feel longer. It's important to note here why it feels like movies are getting longer. So here's a little snippet a little further down in the article. Some types of movies that weren't as long before are definitely longer now, says Loria, who is the editorial director and senior vice president of content strategy for Box Office Pro. But not every blockbuster is getting longer. So some movies that used to be shorter are definitely longer now. Not all of them, but some of them. Interesting. And then here was the final bit that I found really despair-inducing. So for members of Generation X and older millennials who remember visiting the video rental store and bringing tapes home to put in the VCR, it makes sense that movies seem to have gotten longer over time. Because, in a sense, they have. So let's ignore the fact that they used sense twice there in the end. It makes sense because, in a sense, because Spidey's there. So maybe spider sense, maybe that's so basically the conclusion of this article, why it feels like movies are getting longer. The conclusion is because movies are getting longer. So I don't really understand. They brought up like this point that VHS tapes limited the length of movies. It would cost more, obviously, if you needed to make 2 VHS tapes from a movie in order to have it in a blockbuster video, which was a thing. Place I used to go. But that doesn't change the fact that movies are getting longer, in part because that restriction no longer exists. But so that's the reason why movies are, maybe one of the reasons why movies are getting longer. But it feels like movies are getting longer because movies are getting longer. I don't understand. I don't understand why this headline was like this. This could have been, and it might be worth exploring, a headline that could have said, movies are getting longer. But it's not why it feels like movies are getting longer. Movies are getting longer. Here's why. Or even, why are movies getting longer? Not why does it feel like movies are getting longer? It feels like movies are getting longer because movies are getting longer. I felt like that was super important, and it would have been remiss of me not to bring it to y'all's attention. This was on CNN. This was not, this was not Yahoo. I read like some types of movies that weren't as long before are definitely longer now, but not everyone. Like what is the fucking dumbest article I've ever read? I've read dumber. Oh, there was some news about Wolf Among Us 2 today. I was a huge Wolf Among Us fan. I don't know if anybody else here was such... well... you got to play the long game, Anu, right? Like, that article eroded my faith in CNN. So I would argue that was not a good move. Who's at the hospital? I'm yelling at the cloud. I don't mind long movies. I prefer long movies. I hate the fuck out of superhero movies, except for Logan. Except for the depressing ones that are like origin stories. What was it? Logan, there was one other I really liked. And boy, do I hate superhero games. Although I liked the Spider-Man one. The recent Spider-Man one. Who was it that was in the hospital? Let me go back up here and see. I don't think it's unreasonable. Exactly. I'm glad I'm not alone in being. Surely it's I shouldn't get that mad at it. It shouldn't have worked me up that much. Anyway, I loved Wolf Among Us. I'm not 100% clear on who makes up the new Telltale games or Telltale. They're using the same Telltale Games logo here, but on the website it's just Telltale. So I don't know. I'm sure they bought the rights to Telltale Games, and I don't know if it's any of the same people or not. From the teaser trailer, it seems like Bigby has a new voice actor, which I really liked his original voice actor, but maybe I'm wrong. But that's the last bit. Oh, Levy, I'm super tired, so I think I'm gonna call it a night. But if you're around next week, maybe we can talk next week. If that's what I'm assuming that's what the email was about. If it's not, I'll read it either way. But I think I'm gonna call it a night because my voice is going. So. Hey, that's 60 episodes in the can. That's, let me do the math. How, on the road to 100 episodes, what percentage is 60 episodes on the road to 100 episodes? Let me get a pen. Negative 2b plus or minus 4ab squared over the square root of roughly a little more than half. We're a little more than half of the way on the road to 100 episodes. What happens at 100 episodes? Oh shoot, did I get it? Maybe I got it wrong. Yeah, I think it is probably 40%. either way, kind of like we're getting close to 100 episodes, and I can't wait. I need to work on the writing contest. It's probably like, if anybody is wondering about the time frame, I think it's like actually going to be like a summer thing. Like, this is probably getting the ball rolling and figuring out, the sort of ins and outs of it. And then, it wasn't about going live. Let's see. What do we got here? Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll look into that. I totally don't remember that at all. Sorry. Yeah, you could just send me that any time. Okay, so yeah, I will see you all next week, and I hope you have a nice remainder of your week and a lovely weekend. And do we want just one more of these?
Like, I don't know if that thing that they just did with the COVID is like panned out or not, but if it did,
like, I don't know if this writing extravaganza thing is going to pan out or not, but if it does, it's going to be fun. All right. Night, everybody. We'll see you all soon.